Hello, world. Welcome to Divine Masculine Mondays. Happy
Good
Monday.
morning. Happy Monday,
Hey,
world.
good morning.
We're so happy to have a very special guest here today. Hannah Khalil, is that how you say your last name?
That is, you nailed it.
Beautiful. Hannah, we're so happy to have you on today. And for those of you who don't know, Hannah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure.
Well, actually, before you do that, I just want to say that we're going to talk about sex today. So don't go anywhere. If you're listening right now, that's what's about to happen. So with that, here's our very special guest, Hannah Khalil. So Hannah, tell us what you do.
So sex coaching is a new venture that I have started, but it's something that started an interest of mine years ago. And I think it wasn't until recently that I actually knew it was something you could do as a job, like something that people actually seek out, like it's a type of personal development. And that's kind of what I love about it. It's so untapped, and a lot of people don't even know, like, oh, I can hire a sex coach. Like there's someone that I can go to help me with this challenge or this problem or this thing that I just thought was normal that isn't necessarily normal. And through my own personal and sexual development, I realized like this is the area that I want to help, not just women, I mean men too, and as well, and couples. So I completed a certification through that sex chick. She lives in Austin, Texas, and found that this is my most loved topic to talk about. And I love to help people in any way and be able to bring this kind of education to people where they didn't necessarily know that it existed.
Yes. It's so awesome. And it can be so taboo. And now it seems to be a big part of our culture that sex is just kind of everywhere, and people are getting sexualized younger, and then adults our age and older are still figuring out sexuality, right? Because we didn't have we had so many more boxes, it seems like, when we were growing up. And so I know I'm excited to have you on here today, mostly to kind of unpack some of the the things that we've been told and thought about sex, especially the toxic masculine stuff, and all the ways that we don't give ourselves permission to express, and the shame and everything. So I'm excited to get inside of that. And John, what are you most excited for in this Sexploration today?
Everything. I feel like every time the topic of sex comes up with different perspectives, I learn so much. And man, it's like, raise your hand if you had a sex coach growing up as a teenager, and you're now like a great at all the things that are sex. It's like no one is taught properly, no one is coached ever until now. And I think sex is one of the, if not one of, that sexual energy is so important for every human on this planet that wants to create something, whether it's creating like a physical thing or creating partnerships with other humans and relationships. And we were never taught these things. So I'm so excited. You can throw me any kind of little topic out of this subtopic, and it will be a win in my book. So I'm excited for it all. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, and that's the coolest part.
Great. Well, and because we're not on Instagram today, you're not able to ask us questions directly, but you can definitely send us questions. If you're listening, please send questions to us, to Hannah, especially since she's the sex coach here. And
just send it to us, and then we're going to send it to her, or you send it to her. Either way.
Anything that comes along the way. And be sure to click subscribe while you're listening now. So Hannah, you're a sex coach, a sex explorer, and that's what your Instagram said, right? So tell us, like, what is a sex coach and why do we need one?
Well, we need one because, kind of like John said, at least for me personally, my parents never talked to me about sex. I had even in school, we didn't learn anything about it. Like our sex education is where they gave us a bag with feminine products and deodorant, and they were like, here you go. So there was no talk, there was nothing. And so even like growing up in my, teens and 20s, like I the only way I ever learned anything was just through my own curiosity and my own volition to go seek it out, which is what most people do. And they get that education through porn and other ways that aren't really indicative of like what sex really is like. So we don't really have a true mirror of what sex should be like. And we just think it's, sex is penetration, it's going to look one way. And, it's between a man and a woman. And if it's not this way, then you're doing something wrong. And then it creates all these stories and shame that people then take with them for a lifetime. So it's just kind of like any other coach where you kind of unpack like what is the trauma and the shame and the things that you're telling yourself that are creating the stories that are holding you back. And if you're being held back, like for example, like not able to ask for what you want during sex, there's probably other areas of your life where that is also showing up. And so it's all connected. And so when you can heal that sexual part of yourself, it can manifest itself in other areas of your life and bring a lot more confidence. And that's definitely ring true for me.
That is so powerful and beautiful. Yes. So you mean we can't just like learn about sex from porn, huh?
Yeah, no. Nope. Not the mainstream
maybe a wake up
porn
call for some of
that's
you
out
listeners.
there.
Yeah. So it's obviously, if we don't know already, can you talk about some of the like what are some of the damaging things that like learning about sex from watching porn, or just the impact of watching porn on sexual active adults today?
So I think it's probably different for men and women. So I'll touch on both. So I think for women, we think, okay, our vulvas and our vaginas must look a certain way. If they are not that color, that shape, that size, there's something wrong with us. We also get messages of that sex is for male pleasure, and then it's not about female pleasure. And then also, in porn, there's not a lot of softness or sensuality. It's very hard and fast. So we think that is how it is supposed to be. So women just accept that as fact. And also you don't see women asking for what they want or what they desire in porn. So then, we have these fears like of being rejected or, being judged for asking for what we want. Or the biggest one is damaging the male ego on the other side of that. If I ask for this thing, he will think, oh, I'm not doing something right, or I'm not good enough, or I'm inadequate. And then it, creates this whole cycle. And then for men, it's penis size. Like not every man's penis is that big. That is not reality. And so actually talking to a lot, not being a man, but then talking to a lot of men, realizing that a lot of men have insecurities about penis size. It is a very, very, very common thing. And just taking away that stigma that penis size doesn't have to matter, and there is such thing as being too big. And there's so many other workarounds. Like if your penis size is not, what you think it should be, there's tons of other defining like what sex actually is. Most people just think of sex as penetrative sex. And I think if we rewire our brain and create our own definition of what sex can be, anything can be sex. Just making out can be, sex.
Really?
A type of sex.
So likes that.
I'm not a virgin anymore.
So yeah, there's so many ways that you can have sex that don't necessarily mean a penis goes into a vagina. And it can still be pleasurable, and it can still be enjoyable, and it can still be intimate, and it can still be fun.
Of course. Yes. Well, I love that we can just clarify that. If you know it, great. We're reinforcing it. And if not, great awareness that even what I'm taking from that is any person can see that, can take away that we don't have to look a certain way, and that it may actually take quite a bit of work to unprogram that. Like even knowing that, I've still watched porn on my own with my partner, knowing that it's actually, the more I learn about it, the more it turns me off as I watch it. Sometimes it's like I'll go back to it and I'm like, God, it gets harder for me to pull pleasure from that. And I'm started to see in my own journey how much like I need touch and care and nurturing. And I've heard that so much from women, right? That men are just like these aggressive like plows, and women need care and to talk. And so I just want to say out loud, I've learned that in my relationship, that my wife and I are kind of the opposite in that way. Like sometimes she just wants to go, and sometimes I need like care. And but I love that you said talk about kissing too. And because for me, that is one of the ultimate turn-ons, and just any kind of touch can be highly sexual, right? Without having to involve penetration. And it seems like there's a lot of ways to create play and sexuality and self-expression through sex today. Especially, it's like now the world's our oyster, right? There's this awesome playground of and kinks and fetishes and all kinds of things that you can explore. Uh and there's probably some shame around those too, right? Like I heard you talk about size and shape and comparison, and you mentioned shame a little bit. So is that something that you see come up for your clients?
I'll tell you a story. Last week I was in the gym and I was wearing this Lululemon top, and this girl said, she goes, I really love that top. She goes, I have that same top. She was like, but it looks so good on you. I can't wear it at the gym because I don't have any boobs and it's just shameful. And it actually like made me really sad to hear this woman say that she felt shameful and shame around what God had given her, and that she felt like she couldn't wear this top at the gym. And it was that reinforcement that was like, okay, this is why we do this kind of work, because she has been programmed by what means, I don't know her that well, to think that what she was born with is somehow shameful and not acceptable.
But the program is everywhere you watch, like
Yeah.
TV. Like I'm sure she may watch porn. Maybe her partner watches porn with her. But like there's a thing there where all the chicks have like big boobs, for example, and then you can walk down the aisle at a Kroger or HEB, like a supermarket, and see the magazines. Everyone looks a certain way. So the mainstream media does program a certain look. And yeah, how do we reverse that shame? How do we heal that?
It's allowing women to fall in love with their bodies. We're not born not loving our bodies. We are taught that. So if we are taught that, we can unlearn that. And it's all parts of our bodies, our vaginas, our breasts, our everything, because there's so much shame around like, oh, well, my belly's not flat, or this, that, and the other. And then when you don't have body confidence, it's going to bleed into how you feel about yourself during sex.
Yeah.
Which will make a difference in how you enjoy sex and how you experience sex.
Absolutely. And not to mention aging and all the ageism out there. My wife's a musician, and we've always known that it's like a male dominated field, and young women are the only women, like once you hit 30, it's like quote unquote over. But these are all taught, learned things about shame and what women deal with in this, in this society. Like I say our society, like that men have like put on them, right? And we have those things. And then there's so I hear women talking about that. I see younger girls being more and more sexualized. So you think a lot of that. So what you're saying is really a lot of this is learned, right? To try to make up for something. And you even see it on TV. Like I don't remember what show I was watching recently. I thought it was such a beautiful show. And then it seemed like they made teenagers have gratuitous sex in the show in order to make it watchable today. Like I'm just seeing how much sex is put on things and in things in order for us to feel like it's something we want to watch. And so I'm just seeing it permeating everything. So what would you say, like, how can we be responsible for it when, like, how can we, like, what's a healthy way to learn about it when everything, all the programming around us is giving us one message?
I actually think it starts with educating parents. So like our generation now, so we can make sure that when we are bringing up the next generation, that we are giving them the appropriate information for their age. and getting them comfortable with using like the anatomical words for genitalia, and, you know, not shielding them from it, because then they go look in other places and they get complete wrong information. And I mean, that's,
That would be me.
yeah, that was me
That'd
too.
be
That was
kinda
me
like,
too.
oh shit, my parents are so like traditional Asian parents. Like,
Mhm.
like one of the topics we're talking about today, shame, and there's a lot of shame in Asian culture, even when you're talking about sex, that is not procreative to make babies. It's like that is taboo. Like basically, there's no fucking.
I
It's
mean,
only baby making.
that's what we're taught, that sex, the reason we have sex is to procreate, but not to experience pleasure, to
Build intimacy.
build intimacy with ourselves and partnerships or whatever kind of relationship style.
Or to
you're in.
manifest something. Holy shit.
Sex magic.
Like sex
Yeah.
magic. Like that's definitely not a topic. It was not a topic in my parents' house. But whoever I think this wisdom has always been around for ages and ages, but whoever now that it's slowly uncovering these things, like thank God that we're learning and sharing that sex can be
Healing.
Yeah.
co-creative,
Hmm.
and energetic, like your gateway to
So many things.
like the yogic, like ecstasy bliss. Like there's that, and it's not just the one thing that we were taught through porn or
A lot of it's the language that we use too. Like if you think about growing up, say, okay, you know, losing your virginity, it makes it seem like it's a commodity to be lost or like to be given to somebody. So there's already this negative connotation that's kind of associated with it, with that language. And so one phrase that I had this realization very early on, and I was like, what's the alternative? Can we say? And the alternative is sexual debut, which makes it sound much more enjoyable and like you're coming out and you're expressing yourself. And it's like, you're not losing something, you're not giving something to somebody, you know, you're still in your power.
It's like you're graduating into like this whole new, like you're not leaving something behind and losing it, but like you're like stepping into adulthood.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. I like that sexual debut. And it also hit me too, just when you use the word like sexplore, right? Sexplore or sexploration. I that hit me as like, wow, what if I've like stepped in my sexploration now as a teenager, because, or as an adult, right? Let's assume maybe you don't have sex as a teenager, right? You're allowed to wait whatever you want. I remember all this pressure to like lose my virginity by the time I was a certain age. And I think I did when I was 19. I remember trying to younger and it just like not working out. Like the person wasn't ready or they were drunk or something. It wasn't appropriate, right? And then it happened at 19. But it, you know, then people oftentimes in the first time, right? No one may orgasm, especially not the woman.
Oh yeah.
And especially if the man doesn't know what he's doing. And I mean, I read books. I went to the library. I knew what was happening. Like I studied for this.
That's awesome.
Like I made sure I knew what I was doing. And I realized in hindsight, well, what I was going to say is it doesn't always go well the first time, right? It's not always enjoyable. So it's sort of like if you're in this idea of it's not just like your virginity is gone, you're actually still exploring through your body. And one thing I am seeing now listening to you guys is how rare my childhood was. Like my dad showed me books and talked to me about it a lot. I remember at a truck stop, like pulling over and this guy was getting a blowjob and he was like, do you know what that is, son? And I was like, oh my God, yes, I do. And he was like, that's a blowjob, you know, or she's giving oral sex. But in hindsight, I've got to thank my dad because he was really, you know, we thought my dad was like over sexualized person, but in hindsight, I'm realizing he was just like in touch with his sexuality. But he had so much shame about it that he actually went to like a sex recovery program. And I think also he was gay and he wasn't allowed to be that either when he was growing up. And so now, you know, we have to give ourselves permission to just take the lid off and explore, right? And one of the things that I like that you've hit on too is getting to know yourself sexually. And that's a really big, you know, it's not always about the other person and making the two come together perfectly. Like if it's like with anything in a relationship, if you haven't done your own work, right? If you're not like, if you don't love yourself, you can't love someone else. So if you don't know how to take care of and treat your own body and self with respect, then how are you really going to take care of and nurture a sexual relationship?
Yeah. And I think too, there's a lot of shame around like self-pleasure and masturbation growing up. And so a lot of women, I think, you know, they are scared to go there with themselves. Like they've never looked at their vulva. They've never touched. They've never just kind of explored and like seen and felt and breathed into that to see. And it's like, if you can't do that for yourself, you're never going to be able to explain that or communicate that to a partner about what you desire and what you like and what feels good. And that's just, yeah, that's just the truth. And I mean, women typically are so objectified in so many ways that it's almost just releasing that shame is the first step. And then we have to be, fall in love with our bodies through, whatever modality it is.
Is that male and female? Need to fall in love with their bodies?
Yeah, I think, I think it's probably more, the work is probably more, women need to do more of that work because, in society, just throughout time, we've been, shamed a lot more, and our virginity has been used as a commodity, and all, it's trauma that's been passed from generation to generation that we have to release and step into this new, the new sexual revolution that's happening now.
Yeah. Yes. And what do you find is the main thing that's holding people back from being able to be sexually liberated?
Themselves. I mean, that's it. They have to be able to let go and be willing to do the work. And one thing is like, the space that we're in is like, people will spend thousands of dollars, thousands of hours on all kinds of personal development. But no, a lot of people don't think like, oh, sexual development is actually a piece of that. And for me, it was like the missing link. I could tell like there was something that was missing for me. And I think, and I had to listen to my body and my intuition. So I think once people can learn to listen to their intuition about what is best for them and not care about what people think, and letting go of those narratives and those limiting beliefs. Cause I for one, I was holding on to those, I had this story that if I have sex out of a committed relationship, I'm not lovable. It was this or that. It couldn't be both. And I had to do a lot of work around that to finally let that go and be like, okay, yeah, I can still do X, Y, and Z and still be lovable. All those things are possible at the exact same time. Yeah. But a lot of times it's just uncovering that and releasing that shame. But you have to be willing to do the work and actually go there, because it gets deep.
Yeah. Well, we can definitely get deep here on this show, and our listeners are, and a lot of the people are, we've talked about shame here before. And I just think it's such a powerful word. And it's also because it holds so much weight, but there's also so much freedom and possibility to release ourselves of that. And I think my experience too has been working with all kinds of people, and even seeing in myself that our shame really gives us stories. It gives us meaning and purpose. And I know for me, if I release my shame, it's like, what will I have? Right? You no longer have something to go back and beat yourself up about, right? You actually have to get responsible for yourself. And I'm curious, like, what would you say is the number one thing that people have shame about in regards to sex?
I have to pick just one thing.
How about one for the males? And what's the number one male thing that men have shame around, and the number one thing that women have shame around?
I would say for women is probably their bodies. And then for men, it's probably performance, and I'll say inadequacy. I'll kind of put those two together.
Mm-hmm. And when you
I'm not
say
enough. The
performance in
enoughness,
it,
right?
yeah, and inadequacy, what would that look like?
So performance, like I need to, whether it's I need to last a long time
Mm,
to feel like I satisfied the person on the receiving end. You know, inadequacy could be a lot of things. Like maybe they don't feel like their penis is big enough, or they don't feel like they are good in bed. Or like another example, like if a woman wants to bring maybe a toy into the bedroom, they think, okay, well, she wants to bring a toy, so there's something wrong with me.
mm,
I'm not doing something right.
mm,
So
mm,
then they create all these stories in their brain about that.
mm.
And I think people just think sex is supposed to look this certain way. And so then there can be this kind of like performance aspect because they're trying to make it look a certain way for their partner.
Yeah,
And really they're not in touch with themselves,
yeah.
and they're not in touch with their breathing, and it just makes a whole experience where you're disconnected not only from your partner and from yourself.
Mm. So what I'm hearing could make a difference maybe would be like communication or dialogue.
Oh, 100%. Mm-hmm.
So this
What's the
wouldn't have to
saying?
be a performance. This could actually be a conversation.
Communication is the best lubrication. My favorite thing.
Yes, I love that. That's phenomenal. I think we could say that again. Communication is the best lubrication.
Mm-hmm.
And that scares people too, right? I've
Yeah.
noticed I mean, I've had many relationships where actually, again, I was lucky enough to have an older woman as one of my first sex partners. And she really told me like communication is so important. You have to ask me what I want. You have to tell me, like, she was teaching me to like talk dirty and all kinds of things. And I remember trying to bring communication to women in future relationships, like in the moment. Like, what do you want? Tell me, like, what do you like? And then being told, well, when you talk, it turns me off. Or if I talk about it, it actually um I like, let's just do it. I don't want to talk about it sometimes. And so it, you know, I've seen so many gender roles, but like I'm like, what? I thought, you know, we're supposed to talk. And but I found meaning, I just resonate with like, I think it's awesome to talk about. That's something I realized I learned early on. And if you can communicate it, I think it's so sexy because you get to
Oh yeah.
say what you
Agreed.
want. You get to, you know, take out the confusion and the need to be psychic. And but what I'm also seeing is, you know, advocating for oneself. Like this specific partner I'm thinking of, like actually was having a hard time advocating for what she wanted and needed, and it felt almost too intimate to talk about it, right? It was more comfortable being sexual and not talking about it for this person. um and I can assume that, well, I would assume that for a lot of people it can be uncomfortable talking in the right in the act of, but that could just be a result of not practicing talking more during it, during
Well, and you could
intercourse or
practice
sex play or
communication not during sex,
yes.
at any other
That would
time.
be huge, right?
I was going to ask you that because it's like um, I'm learning a lot, you know, by you talking about all of this. And let's say one of your clients, let's say they do the is it like a program course kind of thing? Okay, program or course, and then they go to their partner who's like now he's like a kindergartner, right? And they're like a senior at this by now, right? So there's got to be kind of like a language gap in between. So is this something that you teach your students to, how does that even integrate into the relationship when the other person has zero knowledge and then the one person is like learning so much?
So in that case, I would say talking about it not during the physical act, and having that conversation not even right after. Like maybe it's,
Lunch topic.
yeah, or you're just like hanging out on the couch, and and I think a lot of it is language, how you present it to somebody. Because a lot of people, I actually had a guy from high school reach out to me, and he was like, and he's been with his partner for I think like 15 years, and they have 3 kids, and they're like, he's like, I'm more adventurous and I want to explore things, but we have 3 kids, we've been together a long time, so how do I bring this up? This is a really hard topic to bring up. And you have to take out the shame, you have to take out the blame, you have to take out the criticism. so the other person doesn't feel attacked, like they're on the defense.
Yeah.
So it's really being conscious of the language that you're using and how you're going to present it. So, hey, I think that it could be really pleasurable for both of us to try this thing.
Do you have like prompts?
No,
So
no,
it's like, because
no.
I feel like sometimes
I
that
could
could
come
be
up with some.
a touchy subject. Like, what do you mean? You don't like the way I stroke you? Or
Well,
like,
that's what I'm
yeah,
saying.
yeah,
It could
be
really,
very defensive.
it could
right?
get into that, but
Yeah.
that's why you have to choose what you're saying. So, hey, like I saw this thing, this toy, and I thought it would be cool if we bought it and use it just to, to
Let's
create.
explore a little more.
I mean, if you
Yeah.
like frame it like to create more intimacy,
Yeah.
to expand pleasure, and not make it about the other person.
Yeah.
That way they're not on the defense.
Like a
and they
project,
don't
like
feel critical.
let's do this together. Like, yeah, I saw this cool mountain. Let's go hike it.
I mean, I like
Getting
in
your
my
partner
own
enrolled.
life
Yeah.
is like, hey, like I have this toy and there's no end goal, right? It's just
Right.
let's have fun. Let's just use it. And we're both learning together, like what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And that's it. Like we're figuring it out together. And it's like, when you first started, playing guitar, you weren't good at the first time you picked up a guitar and played it. Like you
Right.
have to practice, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, the guy may not be really good at using this toy the first time, but that's okay. But you also have to give them grace, and you also have to let them know that they're in a safe container, in a safe space to explore this. And then being communicative. And you have to, I think like calibration is the biggest thing. Like, and calibration, I think, is something that you can do like during sex, right? Like a little up, a little to the left, a little harder, like use 2 fingers, that kind of thing. Like in the moment, that kind of thing is, I think, perfectly acceptable. And then they probably appreciate that, because they're probably like, oh, am I doing this right? Like, does she like this? I don't even know.
Yeah.
So if you're actually telling them, then they have some kind of direction,
Yeah.
Would you say it's better for you to work with like a one-on-one client and teaching them this, or is there a scenario where like a couple goes in, so they're kind of like one isn't like a freshman and the other one's like a senior level? Is that a
I mean,
I think,
John, have you had some experiences where you feel like a freshman with some senior
I mean,
level partners?
well, I don't know, because we never talk about it, and I think that's so important. And I think maybe let's say if the next relationship that I like go into partnership with, I think it would be a great idea to invest as a couple with a coach.
Yeah.
And to kind of explore these things together, but like with guidance.
Yeah.
And it's like me and someone can go hiking, right? But if we go to a foreign country, let's say Peru, and we have someone that's like, hey, let me walk you both of you guys through the same time. And just kind of like, I'll give you a little guidance. I think that'd be dope.
Yeah.
We're not going to be wasting a lot of time figuring shit out on our own.
Yeah.
Just like someone like that's 10 steps ahead can say, guys, look out for this bump. And show you this. So, whoa.
And then they can take the tools and the things that they both heard together and then go and implement them. And even if like you don't have a partner that's super interested in that kind of work, I mean, at the very least, you could buy them a book and be like, here's this book, read this book. And maybe it's baby steps.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily you don't need both people to be in coaching, because a lot of times, I think too, if let's say, I think women are probably more inclined to get sex coaches generally, I would think, and their partner sees them learning and growing and evolving, and, they'll sense that, and they will notice that in the energy of the sexual experiences that they're having. Like, okay, something's different. I can tell whatever you're doing is working. And I think communicating that, like, hey, today we learned and talked about X, Y, and Z. And hey, I want to practice this thing. But I think it all starts with the openness and the willingness.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't have the willingness to like step into that coaching container with you, but they at least have the willingness to be in co-creation with you and be open to listen and try and implement the things that you're learning.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really inspiring. And my wife and I have been talking about getting a sex and intimacy coach recently, because we've got all these tools, but like putting them together sometimes from different backgrounds and different trauma related histories can be tricky, right? And so it's something like, I love that you're talking about this together outside of the bedroom and just opening dialogue. And that's one thing I really, really, really believe in, is just, the power of asking for help, the power of saying, I don't know, or I'd like to know. And then asking also, asking consent, and creating partnership, like, hey, I'd really like to try this. How do you feel about this? And that's an opportunity for them to share. Well, I'd love to, but that thing looks really scary to me. Oh, really? Like, why is it scary for you? And you can talk about it and say, well, let's, like, what if we, like, tried it together, and maybe it's not scary, and we can talk about it after and see if you're still scared, but, and if you don't like it, we'll try something else. But you can just to invite some openness, and it can be a great way to, like you said, to talk about your relationship in general, like anything that's there where there's lack of trust, and some of those things, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time when we have resistance towards something is because there's this fear of the unknown. This fear is like, I'm not going to be good at this, or I don't know what to do, and it's like, great lovers are not born, they are made. So you are not born just knowing everything. You have to take the initiative to, whether it's read the book, listen to the podcast, take the course, do the research, real life action, whatever it is, to figure it out. And, with a partner, if there's something like a new toy or a new, if you want to do anal or like whatever it is, you just have to take it step by step and just communicate, like, okay, well, yes, I'm open to trying this, and I'm feeling fear, and just communicating that fear to your partner, and then letting your partner know, like, okay, that's perfectly normal and it's fine, and we'll take it slow, and we'll walk through it together, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know what I really like about all this is that in every relationship, I feel like there's like a polarity, right? Like there's always like the breadwinner, and then there's always like the homemaker, and then there's always the like one that likes to cook and the one that prefers to clean. So there's like this balance. But in every single relationship, whether they're brand new or old, there's both people are having sex. There's not one cook and one cleaner. Like, this is the one thing where both people have to, that and communication. It's like the two things that the two have to do together as a team. And man, there's such a I would say deficiency, because right now you can look for a chef coach, or like that, or like if you want help like making the house look pretty, if that's your jam, that you're the part of the relationship that like wants to do that, you can find interior designers that can help you with this, right? But like, it's been so long that the world has been kind of deprived, or at least it's been a secret of like, wait, we're both going to have sex, and that's part of this relationship. Like, how can we make it like better, or just like, I wouldn't say better because comparison is a thief of joy, but how can we be our best version in that department?
How can we both get what we need so we
Yeah.
feel fulfilled? Like, I think even just simple things like, ideally, how many times a week would you want to have sex? Just having that communication of, because maybe there's a mismatched sex drive, and that happens a lot. And
what do you do when there is one? Let's say the guy wants it like 3 times a day, every day of the week, and the girl.
So he's unemployed. I'm just kidding.
Well, it's also, I want to invite us to, so I'm also, one thing I'm noticing is we're talking a lot about men and women and like sort of the heteronormative relationships. And John, one thing you pointed to was polarity and the importance of that. And so I was wondering if we could sort of steer away from the man and the woman inside of this answer and say, when one person has match sex drive and the importance of polarity, like, Hannah, how do you address that?
So I think even in like same-sex couples, you're still always going to have someone that generally will probably have a more feminine sexual essence, and then one that will have a more masculine sexual essence.
Yeah, or yin and yang, right?
Yeah. And maybe there is a situation where they both have a masculine sexual essence, or they both have a feminine. And I think talking about that and communicating about that, about what your needs are, and negotiating what those needs are. So
Mm.
maybe person X wants to have, ideally for them, having sex 4 or 5 times a week would be perfect. But then the other person over here, twice a week is all that they would desire, and they would be perfectly fine with that. So coming to some middle ground on that, so everyone feels like their needs are getting met,
Mm.
and having open communication about, maybe, a lot of people aren't into this, but like scheduling it,
Mhm.
and being like, okay, on this day, we are going to do this thing. Like maybe we're going to take a sensual bath and then, have our intimate time, and we're going to have sex afterwards. And then I think that way everyone feels like they are getting their intimacy needs met and their sexual needs met, and having grace and compassion for the other party. If your partner only, has a low sex drive, if you love that person, I mean, you're not going to be hammering them every week to like, hey, let's have sex every day. Like, I think you need to have a little bit of grace and compassion to know that, maybe there's a middle ground there.
There's
Yeah.
probably that I'm not exactly like 100% sure, but I feel like that lack of sexual drive could possibly be due to like not providing that safe structure and not having the
Mm.
communication, the lubrication
Yeah.
to bring up that sex drive. So it's a catch 22. If
Yeah.
when you let shit go, it just shit goes, and then your tank is empty.
Yeah.
I feel like if
You make it a
yeah,
priority.
make it a priority,
Yeah.
set a container, and then
Hmm.
create some communication, which is the lubrication. It builds up.
There's ways to make it fun and where you have things to look forward to where it's not just like your mundane kind of thing,
Right.
So like checking off a quota, like, well, Susie and Joe, they said they have sex 7 times a week, so we've got to hit this quota too. Or like,
Yeah.
it's more about like,
I
yeah,
I think people think, there's whatever they think is normal, but there really
Mm.
isn't a normal. It's whatever works for that couple.
Yeah.
Mm.
And there's asexual couples too. I have friends that are practice polyamory, and some of them are very
Mm.
sexually active and some not at all. It's just about having relationships and intimacy.
That could
And
be possibly be I guess a topic with your clients if one person is sex drive is super high and the other one's low. Perhaps that's a topic of conversation. Like, can I seek sex outside of this monogamy?
Well, that's a
even?
whole different
Yeah,
thing.
that's a whole thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's the comfort level on that?
But
Yeah.
you can create anything you want in a relationship. You really can. And there's
There's
someone
no
out
normal.
there, right? And we're as different as a snowflake, right? There's every single person has a different pattern, want, and need.
Mhm.
And I think the polarity is important too. It's something I've noticed as like a guy who used to lean into my feminine a lot. And my wife said, like, sometimes I need you to like take me and go for it. And I wasn't for a long time. And I realized I wasn't feeling safe because I felt like if I really did that, I was gonna like hurt her, or because sometimes it would scare her, right? Because she's been in environments that weren't safe, and I had to learn not to take that personally, right? It actually didn't have anything to do with me. There was trauma there, and there was we would have to care for that, right? And actually deal with the reality of it. And then there was also I realized that I want a partner to like take control and to step into their masculine and take me, and then that's something I love in men and women. And so we got to talk about that because she was like, oh, I'm not really into that. Like, I really like to be dominated and received. And I was like, huh, I like to be dominated sometimes too. So
Mm.
we actually got to talk about it and then find a way to both do that. Like we just have wrestling matches sometimes, and sometimes it's not even sexual. It's just like, and I think she was afraid of her power too. That's something that we got to talk about. And there's not also inside of a heteronormative culture where a woman is taught just to receive, like there's, you know, the I've seen how rare it is in my partners over the years and got to talk to them. And this is again heteronormative, but with women who were afraid to really be aggressive, and that would mean something. And that was something I realized I wanted, and I would have to ask for and communicate for, and got to work through. So there's, we have these gender roles and these gender identities, and then we have polarity. And what I realized it came down to, I was always trying to figure out male or female. This is why I'm saying this. Long story short, that it was just about a masculine, feminine energy, a yin and yang, and finding, what energy is called for and what's needed, and then communicating that, and that you can actually find a compromise, be like, all right, I'll take you, and then you take me, and then we'll talk about it afterwards and see how we can do it more safely or with more compassion. And so I'm wondering if how much you see polarity inside of relationships being an issue today too.
Well, a couple things I want to touch on from what you just said is,
Yeah.
well, you're a switch. It's called a switch, like where you flip back and forth between like being the
Yeah.
dominant and submissive.
Yeah.
Which I think in any situation, it's like no one wants to have sex the same way every time. So having that dynamic, power shift, I think is healthy. And I think as women, a lot of times, we're taught that is not the way to be in a sexual environment, to be aggressive, that's the men's role. So that gets like ingrained in us. So that's why sometimes I think it is harder for women to step into that, and it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it can also be really empowering if you let it.
Yeah. Like that queen energy and role playing,
Right.
which we haven't talked much about too, but that can be like a whole nother fun thing as well. You could play a character that feels powerful if you feel uncomfortable being powerful as yourself, right? Like maybe you could try on a role. Or if you have a hard time being submissive, which I've seen with some men who are taught that you could play a role of being like a submissive student and have your partner be the teacher, and like you can get punished and all kinds of fun things, right? To create safety.
It's uncomfortable for men because they're not used to being sometimes in that role of like vulnerability. And I've been in a situation where that was the case. It was really uncomfortable for him to just lay there, without his hands, without his sense of sight, to just receive and not knowing what was going to happen, but trusting me enough that obviously I'm going to, with care and compassion and all of those things. And, eventually it's like that innate feeling like, okay, it's time for me to take over. This is too much. I don't like this vulnerable position.
Yeah.
But getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's like in anything, that's where the growth happens.
Yes.
What was your original question? I forgot.
I don't know. I'm just processing this. It feels really healing and awesome to talk about. And it's just so, was like writing this flyer up today too, and saying, oh, let's talk about sex, and people are going to be so excited to talk about sex finally. And it's just interesting how much there's still that taboo in culture today. And I grew up in the South. I don't know how it is in Texas, but in Tennessee, we definitely weren't talking about that a lot growing up. And so I think it's refreshing to be able to, but I still see.
Yeah, let's normalize healthy sex talks.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm like out to do, is like not just talking about it with, whether it's a girlfriend, gives them permission to be like, okay, yeah, like this thing happened with me and my partner, and then they kind of get permission to open up and start talking about it. And I think the more we do that, it will create that normality instead of, it being like, oh, we don't talk about that, or that's private.
All right.
I don't remember what we were talking about.
Well, we lost you. Well, we should wrap up here, but I wanted to say before we do, kind of wanted to just talk about some of the takeaways from today's conversation and see like what is the number one thing for someone who feels like a little lost or confused. What would you tell them as a good starting place to start to heal their relationship with sex and intimacy?
Getting really clear on what it is that you desire, first and foremost, before whether you're single, in a relationship, whatever it is, getting really clear on that and how you want to feel. how do you want to feel at the end of a sexual encounter with someone? So, and work backwards, right? So if I want to feel this type of way, if I want to feel loved and nurtured and cared for, what are the steps that need to happen before that in order for me to feel this way? And so when you're really clear on your desires and your wants and your turn-ons, then you can start creating that in your life and bring that into your current partnership or your future partnership. And from there, the possibilities are really just endless.
Awesome. That's so beautiful. What a great
Frozen?
advice. To just,
Okay.
yeah. To start with how you want to feel and get clear on what you do want and work backwards from there. I think that's really, really great advice. So just want to say that again out loud for myself and everyone listening. And John, what would you say is your biggest takeaway from today's conversation? You could, or just a couple things you're taking away from today.
Always be curious, to always be a student and be open to, just to be open to learning about this more has been really big, because I do invest a lot in myself, yoga and going to breath work and buying books. And this is definitely another route to invest in myself. I think so many couples out there and just regular humans, solo humans, could totally benefit from learning more about this. So that's my biggest takeaway, is that there's just this vast wealth of wisdom to be attained.
Yes. So just gaining more wisdom and knowledge, and being more open. I think for me, it's really like stepping up to the plate and practicing what I preach. Like, I'm going to talk to my wife about signing up for a sex workshop or coach soon, because we've been talking about that a lot, to increase our intimacy and joy, and just to be open to take it to the next level, to not settle, and just know that there's always a space. Like, I'm sure she'd love to tell me more things, right? So it's like an opportunity for me to say, hey, and even if you're single or in a relationship or not, just to say like, hey, what do you want? And also I'm going to sit in meditation today and ask myself what I want. I haven't just sat and thought about that in a while. I enjoy my relationship, but I don't spend time thinking more like, what would I really, really like in just a dream situation, to create that right now. So I think that's really great advice. Great place to start.
So, and I think, going back to what I said, is like, also, how do you want your partner to feel? Not only how do you want to feel, like, how do you want to make the person on the receiving end feel as well?
Yes. Very important. Yes. You're not in this alone. It is a dialogue. Yeah, totally. And
teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah. And what if you ask them how they would like to feel? How do you want to feel when you're done with this sex adventure today? Shit, that'd be awesome to know, right? You don't have to guess anymore. So what beautiful, beautiful advice. Well, I've gotten so much out of this today. I'm so grateful for your time, Hannah and John. And if you have questions, you're listening, please follow Hannah. Hannah's Instagram, we didn't get on there today, but it's Hannah Alexandra K. And this is Hannah Khalil you're listening to. And Hannah, if we want to follow you or learn more, do you have a website or any place you'd like us to go to follow you?
Not a website just yet. And that will be coming. But yeah, Instagram is the best place, and I can be messaged on there as well.
Awesome. So please reach out to Hannah. And if obviously, we're happy to field any questions. And if there's anything around this topic that you'd like to hear us talk about more in future Divine Masculine Mondays, please let us know. Hannah, I would love to have you back here, especially when the internet's working for us again, so we can get you out to more people on Facebook and Instagram. But if you are listening, we're so grateful for having you today. And Hannah, thank you so much for your time and wisdom.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah. Before
Appreciate it. It's
My
been fun.
pleasure. It has. We'll have a great Monday, and I'll look forward to the conversation next week. So follow Hannah and go explore. Happy Monday, everyone.
Sexplore.
Sex.
Yes.
Yes.
Sexplore.
Yes,
Bon
dude.
voyage.
Bon voyage. Thank you.